Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk about an important infrastructure project that's scheduled to begin construction later this year in the city of Carson. The project is called the Clearwater Project. And let me talk about three areas. What is the project? Why it's important? And what is construction going to look like? Let me first tell you who we are. We are the sanitation districts of Los Angeles County. We collect and treat sewage, or what we call wastewater, for over half the population in the county, about 5.6 million people. Our service area goes from the South Bay all the way to the Antelope Valley. We serve 78 of the 88 cities in the county and unincorporated county areas. The Clearwater Project focuses on the southern part of the county in that large green service area called the Joint Outfall System. So back in 2006, we started a multi-year effort to evaluate the Joint Outfall System to try to identify improvements that we would need in order to maintain its reliability and to ensure that there was sufficient capacity to serve the growing population through the year 2050. And over that multi-year planning effort, we held over 500 public meetings in the South Bay area, as you can see in the blue dots. And really the goal was to engage with the public, to share some of the options we were considering, but more importantly, to get feedback from stakeholders on those options. And all that input helped shape the ultimate project that was approved by our board of directors. So why is the Clearwater Project important? In order for me to answer that question, I need to explain how our joint outfall system works. And one thing that you need to know is that this system is designed to serve over 5 million people. And it goes from the beach all the way to the San Gabriel Valley. And the hub of the entire system is the one facility in Carson called the Joint Water Pollution Control Plant. So whether you live in Pasadena, Monrovia, Manhattan Beach, Compton, you depend upon that facility in Carson. And here's why. Well, when you flush your toilet, that sewage or wastewater goes into the local sewers, and then from there it flows into the larger sewers that we call trunk sewers, which are shown here in the blue lines. And the sewage is directed to one of 7 wastewater treatment plants in the system. The one interesting thing about this system is that 6 out of the 7 plants actually remove the solids and put it back into the sewer system so that it all flows down to our plant in Carson, where the solids for the entire system are managed. And we do that because it's much more cost effective to manage it at one location. Now, the plant in Carson depends upon 2 tunnels to take the treated water out to the ocean. These 2 tunnels, one 8 feet in diameter, the other 12, were built in the 1930s and 50s. So they are old. They're 60 and 80 years old. They weren't really built to current seismic standards, yet they crossed 2 earthquake faults. They also have a limited flow capacity, which really comes into play when it rains across the LA area. And that is because rainwater gets into the sewer system and the flows going into the Carson plant can more than double, which means the flows going through the tunnels can more than double as well. And back in January of last year, 2017, there were major storms that came through the LA area, and the flows to the Carson plant more than doubled and almost overwhelmed the capacity of the tunnels, which meant that the water started backing up and almost flooded our plant. So what would happen if the existing tunnels were to collapse because of an earthquake, or there's just way too much water for the tunnels to handle? Well, sewage would still flow into the Carson plant. So the treated water coming from the plant has to go somewhere, otherwise the plant will flood. And we can't have that because it would knock out all the electrical equipment that's there, and it would take months, if not years, to restore to normal operations. So we would be basically in emergency mode. So what we would have to do is to allow treated or partially treated water to come out of the plant into the Wilmington drain and let it flow into Machado Lake. Many of you know that a lot of money has been spent in restoring Machado Lake, making it into a precious resource. Well, under this emergency situation, this unauthorized, unpermitted discharge, that investment would be jeopardized. But let's say that that measure was not enough. Maybe the Wilmington drain was full of stormwater already, or there's just too much flow going into the plant. Well, now we have more dire measures to consider. We can either let the sewage come out through the manholes and onto the streets, and of course, we wouldn't want that because that impacts public health. So now we will be faced with an even more dire situation, more dire measure rather, in that we would look upstream, open up the valves next to the Dominguez Channel, and allow raw sewage to go into the channel. And of course, that would flow into the Los Angeles harbor and eventually into the surrounding beaches. So rather than wait for this situation to occur, we want to do something about that today. And that's exactly what we're doing. And which is why we're building a new tunnel that will go from our plant in Carson all the way down to Royal Palms Beach, where we're going to connect the new tunnel to our existing ocean outfalls, shown here in the purple lines. Now, if you don't know what an outfall is, it's basically a pipe that goes at the bottom of the ocean outward, and at the end of the pipe are holes so that the treated water can just flow out into the ocean. And one thing you'll notice is that the existing tunnels shown here in blue are pretty much like a straight run down to the beach from our plant in Carson. Whereas the new tunnel, shown here in green, is kind of a squiggly line. Well, the reason is because one of the things we heard over and over again from our outreach a few years ago is that people didn't want the new tunnel to go underneath their homes. They would rather have the tunnel go underneath the streets. And that's exactly what we're doing. So the tunnel will follow the streets and under Harbor Regional Park. So construction will begin later this year in Carson, and then 7 years later, it'll end at the beach. The new tunnel will be about 18 feet in inside diameter, enough to manage the storm water flows. It'll be 7 miles long, and it'll cost about $700 million to construct. And of course, it'll be designed to current seismic standards. So how do you build a new tunnel nowadays? Well, all over the world, the technology that is used is called a tunnel boring machine, which is shown here on the slide. It's a very controlled and sophisticated manner of tunneling, and it's a very safe manner of tunneling. So when you look at it, at the front is a cutting head that removes the soil. The soil is pushed towards the back through conveyor belts. But more importantly, the tunnel boring machine goes about 5 feet, it stops, and then the walls for the tunnel are put in. And then once that section of tunnel is put in, it goes another 5 feet, it stops, and then the next section of tunnel is put in. So the tunnel is built as you go, which means there is never empty space for the surrounding soil to go into. It's always reinforced, and it supports everything above it, all the way up to street level. If you were to go inside one of these tunnel boring machines into the control room, you would see that everything conceivable is being monitored, which makes it for a very safe and controlled manner of tunneling. Even so, along the tunnel alignment, we're going to have 1,000 monitoring stations where we have sensors at street level to monitor for movement. We monitor the utility lines underneath the street, and we have sensors that go all the way down to the tunnel boring machine, kind of like an early warning system. And so with this comprehensive system, we protect the street above and the adjacent properties. As I alluded to earlier, construction is going to start at our facility in Carson. If you were to drive there and go to the corner of Lomita and Figueroa, you would see an empty lot, which is part of our facility. And in that lot, we're going to construct a shaft that's between 50 and 60 feet wide so that it can be used to lower the tunnel boring machine and then allow it, once it's lowered, to start the tunneling. That shaft will also be used to remove all the excavated soil from construction, and it'll be used to actually lower the materials, the tunnel wall sections, for the construction of the tunnel itself. Now, one of the things that we pride ourselves in is being good neighbors. We have done so since we were there decades ago, and we want to continue to do that during construction, which is why the tunnel boring machine itself will be electric. The on-site generators will be electric. And the equipment that requires engines will have modern, clean engines. We're going to have a sound barrier to avoid sounds from impacting the surrounding neighborhoods. That barrier will also serve as a way of, so that you don't see the construction while it occurs. The trucks that haul away the dirt will also have clean, modern engines, and the trucks will be directed away from the homes. So one of the things we committed to early in the planning process was to use clean engines. And the engines we committed to, EPA calls tier 3. But we're going to step it up. We're actually going to use tier 4, which is 86% cleaner with respect to the pollutant called NOx, and 90% cleaner with respect to particulate matter. Our mission is to protect public health, your health, and that's exactly what we're doing. As I mentioned, the traffic will not pass by homes. Instead, once the trucks leave the site, it'll take a left turn off on Figueroa, go to Sepulveda, make a left, and get right on the freeway. Now you're probably wondering, well, how much truck traffic are we talking about? Well, if you compare it to existing traffic on Sepulveda, you're talking about an increase of 1 to 2%. But notwithstanding, we're going to work with the city of Carson in developing a traffic plan. We're also going to look at, in conjunction with the city, to see if any improvements can be made at the traffic light there. Additionally, we're going to try to avoid peak hours for traffic. So once the tunnel boring machine is in the ground, tunneling will be invisible until it daylights at the beach 7 miles later. It'll start about 70 feet below the surface, and then once it gets into the Palos Verdes Peninsula, it'll be about 460 feet below the surface. And just before the tunnel boring machine reaches the beach, we will have a small shaft constructed so that we can remove the machine and so that we can start the work of tying in the new tunnel with the existing ocean outfalls. And here's a simulation of what that construction is going to look like. The beach will always be accessible to beachgoers and surfers. Construction is only going to occur during the week, so no weekend work. And once the construction is done, we're going to restore the site to its original condition. So let's look at the timeline for the project. As I mentioned, we're done with the planning phase. The project was approved by our board of directors in 2012, and since then we've been working on the design of the tunnel, which we are wrapping up. And later this year, we will start construction in Carson, and the construction will wrap up 7 years later at the beach. Now, we want to continue to be good neighbors during the construction, and part of that is to keep you informed of the events of construction, giving you information. And so we have a Facebook page, we have a dedicated website, and also if you have questions or concerns, you can either email us or you can call us. Because our goal is to be your advocate, to hear from you of concerns or questions so that we can answer those. And, we plan on being there for the next 7 years. And so we want to be your partners in this infrastructure project. And you're welcome to call me anytime, Glenn Acosta, at the number shown on the left. Or you can call the supervisor for a public information office, Basil Hewitt, which is shown on the right. Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you over the next 7 years.